decide for yourself whether or not he actually said that. Spoiler alert, I think it's pretty controversial, although the prosecution thinks he did. So today was about, if I were to summarize it, guns, Gucci, and a Wildcat. There were so many crazy stories and interesting side channels today. So I will get into all of that. And at the end, we're going to play that clip. I've got a couple of clips to play for you today, but we're going to play that clip and let you decide, do you think Alec Murdaugh confessed to killing his son? I'm very curious what everybody has to say. We got our first statement from the jury today. This is the first time we'd heard anything from the jury. And what they said was they wanted the court to remind the audience that jurors are to remain anonymous. So they obviously are feeling the international pressure. By the way, I really appreciated all the people who put in the comments where they're from for my Friday post. It was so fascinating. I mean, people were from absolutely all over the place, and it was just great to see that and to see all the interest in the case and to learn about that. And while I'm thinking about it, because I always forget till the end, please be sure to like this video. It'll get out to more people. We'll have more people in our chat. And also be sure to subscribe. So the first thing we did today was back to the theme of disturbing the scene. And we found out one pretty important point. A detective said that she admitted that there was a bloody footprint in the feed room caused by one of the law enforcement officers. That's important because, as Worley admitted, as few people as possible are supposed to be walking through the scene. And instead, you have a law enforcement officer actually creating evidence, a bloody footprint right there at the scene. And it was specifically in a place where the perpetrator may have been, and she did admit that. It also led to one of the most classic back and forth. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my phone to make sure we don't get any disturbings. So one of the most classic back and forth the whole time, where Dick Harpootlian, the attorney for Alec Murdaugh, said, do we know what other evidence the police may have destroyed? And the detective Worley said, I have no idea. And Harpootlian said, that's right, we don't. It was really a classic kind of cross-examination move. There was also testimony about a bullet in the doghouse. And it actually, while it may sound a little frivolous, turned out to be pretty important because that bullet came from a different trajectory, and that ended up being hugely important. Now, the projectile in the doghouse was not something that the people who came out the day of seemed to care anything about. In fact, they didn't get out there until July 16th, over a month after the murders, to do some measurements of this bullet hole. What they found was that that particular bullet came from, not from the direction of the feed room, but from the opposite direction. And it led to another great moment of cross-examination where Dick Harpootlian had the witness get down and stand right beside him and stand there so that they could look at a large blow up together. And he could say, you know, here is one bullet being shot, here's another bullet being shot, and they were at opposite ends, opposite directions. I'm trying to move my hands here. Here we go. Now you can see they were at opposite directions toward each other. And so the witness, it was just super awkward with the witness because she clearly was embarrassed and felt like this was a problem, like there really might be two shooters. And that was the defense conclusion was, doesn't that make it likely that there are two shooters? And she said, well, the person could have gone around, but it just starts to seem a little strange if you have somebody shooting two different guns and from two different directions at one person, one gun from two different directions and two guns. It just starts to seem a little strange. So that was a really important point from today's testimony. And at one point he said, wouldn't one explanation for this be that there were really two shooters? And it was really hard to hear what she said, but I felt like what she said was, yes, she admitted it. And the prosecution came back with, well, it could have been that somebody was moving around. but it did feed into the defense theme that there were really two shooters. There was also some testimony which didn't really go anywhere today, but I have a feeling we'll learn more about a shoe print on Maggie's leg in the dirt. Now, they weren't able to process that, is what the witness said. She admitted SLED didn't use proper photo procedures, and it would have been better if they had done that. She also said that it might have been a footwear impression, but no one at the scene that night appreciated the fact that that might have been what it was. Prosecution said, well, maybe it wasn't a shoe print at all. So we're left with sort of some questions about that, but it clearly was an important point. There was also testimony about biological matter on the front of the ATV. Now, Harpootlian, the defense attorney, objected, saying, you never tested that. You don't even know what it was. And that objection was overruled, but on cross-examination, the witness admitted that was never tested. And it could have been deer blood, it could have been anything, deer blood, anything. They didn't really know what it was. We did get back to the question of the shirt, too. Was it clean? Because the prosecution seems to have two stories. On the one hand, that it was clean, and that was because Alec Murdaugh had changed clothes and somehow disposed of the bloody clothes, perhaps while driving to his mother's house. On the other hand, there was a suggestion that it had blood on it. So we've got both of these. I'm not sure which one the prosecution will ultimately go with, but this witness said that it was not completely clean. There were smudges on it, and admitted that bleach and rust can lead to false positives with the LCV testing for blood. So although the shirt tested or signaled positive presumptively for blood, in fact, the later test apparently showed no blood on the shirt. We got a little bit on the water around Paul's body, but not anything to help us. We've been talking about it in the group. What on earth is with the water around Paul's body? Was somebody sloppily trying to clean up the scene? Was somebody cleaning out the dog kennel? We're not totally sure, but this witness said, well, nobody asked her to take a sample of that to determine whether there was human blood in it. So we don't and aren't going to find out a lot more about exactly what it is. So let me throw out again for all the new people coming in, be sure to like and be sure to subscribe, because I'm doing this every night this week at 7 o'clock. And trust me, you do not want to miss this trial. It's amazing. We went through some phone records, and right after this, we're going to start hitting some of the things. I've got 2 video clips that you're going to want to see, because I want you to think through what it is that was said at the trial today. It was bombshell if the prosecution's right, and not at all a bombshell if the defense is right. We'll see. There was talk. We did a lot of evidence today, quick evidence, moving it into evidence so that an expert or someone else can talk about it. There were phone records of Paul's conversation, or Paul's phone messages, text messages to his friend Rogan Gibson. Those are going to be important, because there is one point later when we're supposedly going to hear Alec Murdaugh's voice in the background when he wasn't supposed to be at the scene. So we'll see about that. But the text messages said things like, see if you can get a good picture of it. This was related to a dog who was ill. They were trying to figure out how to get the dog treated. Marion wants to send it to a vet, get him to sit and stay. He shouldn't move around too much. There was no response to that. Up until then, they had been texting back and forth, but it was at 8:49 when Rogan Gibson sent a text that there was no response from Paul. So the presumption then is that was about the time frame when there was the actual murder. Thank you, Young Tane. I appreciate that comment. So today, if you had to pick a theme for at least a couple of hours, I would call it guns, guns, and more guns, because they hauled out guns and they brought them up there. They even admitted them into evidence. We'll talk about that. Apparently, SLED went to the house to look for guns, went to Murdaugh's house to look for guns. I don't believe they searched the house. They just went and looked for the guns. And boy, did they find guns. There was a .300 blackout rifle on the wall of the gun room. 300 blackout rifles are important because that's the gun that killed Maggie. There was also a thermal scope on it where you could shoot in the dark. There were 300 blackout casings, not 300 of them, but 300 blackout casing that was weathered, several of them, near the stoop of the house, entering the gun room right at the flower beds. And in the gun room, there were multiple 12 gauge, some of them semi-automatic, which was the type of gun that killed Paul. Now, of course, this is a hunting lodge, so it's not exactly a surprise that there were guns. That's not something that's stunning. The defense repeatedly objected, saying, look, there's no evidence that this was the gun that killed Maggie or this was the gun that killed Paul. And in fact, apparently the prosecution's argument is, and I'll get to it, but the prosecution's argument is, that's right. This is not the gun, and that's our point. So the defense objected, repeatedly saying relevance, this isn't tied to the murders. The judge overruled all of the objections, and the judge finally said to the prosecutor, do you want to respond to the speaking objection? Now, for those of you who were tuned in and saw that, I'll give you just a little quick explanation of that. So typically, an attorney is supposed to do very abbreviated objections. So it would be objection, relevance, objection, foundation. It would be things that are really short. They're sort of code back and forth with the judge. A speaking objection is where you explain why you're objecting in a way that the jury can understand. Obviously, that's more effective, right? What you want to do is plant the idea in the jury's mind, but you're not supposed to do that. So the judge, apparently tired of the speaking objections, and actually said to the prosecution, do you want to respond to the speaking objection? Which I've never seen done before, but I thought it was pretty funny. And this is what the prosecutor said. I got it, I think, a quote. It's very important to show the extensiveness of the investigation that was done, particularly as regards to firearms. And there were multiple guns that were tested. And there will be an analyst here later to show how those guns were tested and what was the result of those. So admitting these guns and evidence to show the extent of what was tested is very relevant, Your Honor. I think what he's saying is we tested all of these and proved they were not anything that could have fired the bullet. And therefore, that shows we did a thorough job of testing, and therefore we narrowed it down to a specific, because you may remember there were markings on the casing for the 300 blackout that were, according to an expert, unique. So I think they're laying the foundation to try to get that testimony from the expert in. Defense vehemently objects to any of that coming in. Now, I thought, I thought that the objections from the defense were pretty well founded, that a lot of the reason for putting all of these guns in, and they literally were starting to stack up there, and for talking about all of this, was because it sort of paints Alec Murdaugh, at least for some people, as some kind of crazy gun-toting lunatic, somebody who owns a lot of guns and must be a dangerous person. Now, in a hunting area in South Carolina, I doubt seriously that's going to get very far, but there are people, of course, who would think that, who would be surprised by the amount. I will say one thing for Alec Murdaugh, the guy's got friends. It was amazing how many people showed up. I mean, there were it must have been like the entire bar association of Colleton County sitting there, because, you know, they had a picture of the inside of the house. I think this is the next day. And, you know, who's that? Who's that? Who's that? And they knew all of these people. They were all attorneys, and they were his partners. And it wasn't like he had 12 people out there to help advise him. It was like all his friends came to support him. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And now for a bombshell piece of evidence, I don't know if people are talking about it, but the Gucci receipt. And I'm going to play you a clip of Alec Murdaugh's facial expression during the testimony about the Gucci receipt. Now, it came in the context of a witness saying we searched the trash at the shed, because that was where they apparently took the trash from the house out. So we looked at that, and they found empty boxes of ammunition, including 12 gauge shotgun shells. There's nothing surprising about this. Again, hunting lodge. But there also was a credit card receipt that had on it Gucci $1,021.10, and that was circled. One of the entries on there was Gucci. Now, I watched Alec Murdaugh's reaction and was like, oh, that's very interesting. So I did a close-up of it, and I want you to watch his expression. What I want you to look for is, I want you to look specifically at how he blinks, he cocks his head. After he hears this, he swallows. I think all of this means that he knows something about this receipt and why it was circled. It does not necessarily mean that he killed Maggie and Paul. I don't think it has anything to do with that. But he does know something about this subject that we don't know. And I think you'll see that when I play this clip. And I saw some questions in, are we going to talk about the supposed confession? Absolutely. And we're going to play the clip. You do not want to miss that. Stick around. That's going to come at the very end. I want all of you to vote on whether or not you think he confessed to murder. I think it's very highly controversial, but we will see. Okay. So let me add, this is Alec Murdaugh during the discussion about the Gucci receipt. Now, there are lots of things this could be, but let's just take a look at his.
3 minutes and 7 seconds.
That is appeared to be a credit card statement or receipt, and it's got an item circled on it.
And was there was an item circled on it?
That is correct.
And what was the store on that particular item?
Gucci store?
Gucci?
Yeah.
Right. And what was the amount?
$1,021.10.
Okay. And somebody had circled that particular entry, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, now watch him because he thinks the limelight is off, and you see him turn his head to the side and swallow. I'll play that last part just real quick.
$1,021.10.
Okay. And somebody had circled that particular entry, is that correct?
That is correct.
Tilt and swallow and see him do his. So I think all of that is to say that that receipt had something. Now, could it have been that they had an argument over whether Maggie should have spent over $1,000 on Gucci? Absolutely. Could it be that they had some kind of dispute because Maggie said, I didn't buy this. Did you buy this for somebody else? Could have been. There has been no testimony that there was some kind of affair in the local community. And I think given how small the community is, that if there were evidence about that, I think we would definitely hear about that. So that's my opinion, is that we would have heard about that. But I thought it was super interesting to see how strongly he reacted. Then we talked about there was 300 blackout ammo in a couple of magazines in the house that matched the brand and the caliber that were used to kill Maggie. So does that mean anything? No, but it's, little pieces of evidence start to stack up, because that's what the state has, is sort of circumstantial evidence. So that's another little piece that gets added on. Then we talked a little bit about Maggie's phone being found a quarter mile away. And that is so interesting. We have got to get more into that. But it was just a little that somebody said, yeah, that's what happened. We didn't really get there, but that is going to be a huge fact. We also talked about downloading, they talked about on a recording, downloading Alec Murdaugh's phone. And he talked about how he wanted to be sure he didn't violate any client confidences. And that's like a normal thing an attorney would worry about, is he wouldn't want to violate any confidences of his own client. So that seemed totally normal to me. And he seemed very casual about it, not like, oh, no, you can't look at my phone. It might have client confidences. It wasn't anything like that. It was like, oh, yeah, I'm sure we can figure it out. We'll just work it out. It seemed very relaxed and casual. He talked about, and we're going to get to the strange story of the day, but that weekend they have been to a football game together, Maggie and Paul and he, and that Paul and Alec that day had gone out looking for wild hogs and had shot targets. And then the prosecutor said to the witness on there, because this was all done by playing a video. This is not, of course, Alec Murdaugh testifying, because he's not testifying. So apparently 300 blackout can be used to shoot wild hogs. So that was one thing that the prosecution brought out. There was also strange testimony about Paul Murdaugh having high blood pressure, which is really strange given he was only 22 years old, and that Maggie herself went to a doctor in the afternoon. But the strange story of the day, I thought, was Alec Murdaugh's recount of seeing a wildcat. He said a wildcat, right before he went out to the sheds to check and found the bodies, a wildcat ran across the driveway. He never had an impression, though, that it was a person. And then he said, I'm just throwing out an idea because it was in my mind. So I thought that was a strange story about the wildcat, but apparently even he didn't think it had anything to do with anything. I guess the thought was, could it have been a person? And just in his mind, he thought it was a wildcat. But anyway, that went nowhere. He then talked about Maggie's and Paul's bodies and seeing those. He talked about that on the videotape. That was an interview of him. And he said he didn't know whether or not they were dead, but he knew it was bad. And he got really choked up and talked about going to the house to get a gun. He said he wasn't sure which one he brought back, and there was some confusion there. He also talked about the threats to Paul. That's been a huge issue, because if Paul had threats to him, and Alec Murdaugh said that from the beginning, I mean, from the 911 call on, every time he said Paul has been getting threats because of the boat wreck he was in, because he was accused and about to be tried for boating under the influence and killing someone, a young girl, Mallory Beach, in the process. And he had enemies, and whenever he would go out, people would threaten him. So remember, it's not by text, so it's not traceable. It supposedly happens, I guess, at bars or just when he's out in the community. He talked a lot about Paul being irresponsible. He talked about him having been irresponsible with guns, clothes, and even his dad's boats. I could just kind of picture, like, how do you lose a boat, you know? It seems like it was under me one minute. The next thing you know, I'm swimming. I just wondered about that. I guess you get to the beach and then you wander off and you forget where the boat is. But there was a good deal of talk about the irresponsibility. Alec Murdaugh talked about his relationship with Maggie as being really good as it possibly could be. And he said that not in a questioning tone, but as really a positive thing. That is a really broad statement that he made. If there's anything to dispute that, I think the state will bring it. And if there's not, that's a strong point in Alec Murdaugh's favor, because there would be people in the community who would say, you know, they were having trouble. She told me she was seeking a divorce. And there were rumors about that. So if no one comes to testify about that, then this is a point in Alec Murdaugh's favor, I would say. He also got really just hysterical crying in the interview, as he said she was a wonderful wife and that she didn't work, and always said it was her job, being privileged enough not to work, to make sure that Alex and the boys were always taken care of. And he said she took care of everything. She did absolutely everything. There was finally talk about, not finally, but almost finally, I'm building up to the big, was there a confession, which you are going to vote on. And I'm just so curious about what you think. Paul's stolen rifle. Now, Alec Murdaugh talked from early on about Paul's rifle having been stolen. He said he told people about it, such as their cousin who was in law enforcement, some other local officers, but he never reported it. The reason was, in his mind, because he thought, although Paul said it was stolen, he wasn't at all sure that it was stolen, as opposed to Paul actually just misplaced it. So he didn't want to report it as stolen, but he mentioned it to law enforcement years or months before, because just in case it was ever used in some inappropriate way, he didn't want to have anything that would come back on the family. He wanted people to know it had been stolen. And he said sort of casually that he was talking back and forth about whether they replaced Paul's gun, Paul's 300 blackout, because initially there were 2 blackouts, one bought for Paul, one bought for brother Buster. And apparently Buster's was black and Paul's was tan. And the 2 of them Paul's was the one that was lost. And he said, and we replaced it. And he said, Buster thinks we didn't replace it, but I know we did. I know we replaced it. And he said, casually, not at all like he was upset. He said, there'd be a record, right? There'd be a record. You could find the record. As if asking law enforcement to find the record. Again, he didn't seem to be hiding that. He seemed to be very open about that. They even gave him victims advocate information so he could contact them as a victim of the crime, which I thought was a little harsh if in fact what they thought was that he was the one at fault. So now, though, we are going to get to the point we have all been waiting for. I want you to look at the supposed confession. I want you to tell me if you think what the prosecution said is correct or whether it's false. Now, the question is whether or not he says on this videotape, I did him wrong, as opposed to they did him wrong. I think, well, I'm going to let y'all decide. I'm going to put it up there. I did a little clip of it so you can get it really fast. And here, I'll play it for you.
Is this so bad? They're getting so bad.
Okay.
I can tell you, it's just is this so bad? They're getting so bad.
Oh, shoot. I bet I had it on double speed. I watched this on double speed. I'm really sorry.
Is this so bad? They're getting so bad.
Dramatic picture.
They did him so bad.
Is this so bad? They're getting so bad.
Dramatic picture that he saw of Paul and Maggie. What did he say?
It's just so bad. I did him so bad.
I did him so bad.
Yes, sir. He's such a good boy.
Alec Murdaugh. You see Harpootli and the other lawyer go, what the heck?
But the little things that we can understand is necessary.
And you also see Alec go, I didn't say that. We'll play it again.
I can tell you, it's just is this so bad? They're getting so bad.
So anyway, the question is, does he say they did him so bad or yeah, it is too fast. I'm so sorry about that. I was so excited. I had this video. And someone was like, Lee, you're getting better at the technology. And yet. So I don't think there's anything I can do to slow it down right now. I don't know how to do that anyway. Let's see. Can I do that? Nope. I don't have that option. So I tell you what, I'm going to post this later in a little short clip. You can send to your friends and get everybody to see what they think. Way too fast. Yes, it is too fast. I'll play it one more time for those who think maybe they can hear it, but it is really.
Is this so bad? They're getting so bad.
I think he says they did him so bad, but I will let y'all decide. So go to the set. The thing is, I've got it in. Well, you know what I might could do. Let's see if this will work. I don't think I'm going to be able to do this fast enough. The problem is that it's loaded into the live stream software. It's not like I have control of the video itself. It's like in the software. So I don't think I can do that. The CC caption is, there are 2 words he says. There are 2 different phrases. So the person who says they said that is something that it caught the first time, but it's missing the words for the section where he would say either I did him so bad or they did him so bad. I guess my thought too would be having, according to the prosecution, concocted this elaborate scheme to hide everything that he did. Would he then just say, oh, I did him so bad to the person interviewing him? It seems rather questionable. And as to why the defense didn't object, I think the defense, if you watch them, I think they were caught completely flat-footed. I think they were like, what? You see him say, I didn't say that. You see Murdaugh say, I didn't say that. And you see the 2 attorneys look at each other like, what? And I really think they were caught flat-footed. I don't think they ever heard that in what was said. And I think it was a surprise. But the prosecution then came back in and said, as you heard, didn't he say to you, I did him so bad? And they're taking this as a confession, as he actually admitted he had done something bad to Paul. So that is going to be, yes, I really do think that the defense lawyers were surprised. I think they will come back tomorrow having listened to this over and over all night and say, he didn't say I, he said they. And maybe they'll do it more slowly than I did. I'm going to see if there's any way I can play for you. I may be able to play it on the iMovie for you real slow, which I would love to do because I put it in iMovie. Let's see what I can do. And maybe share my screen with you. Let's try it. Let's take it back to the beginning. And I can probably see. This is depending on me to do a lot of different things, including slow it down, which I have to figure out how to do. Darn, and y'all are interested. I know you are. Me too. But that could explain why it was so hard for me to hear. I had it on double speed. Here we go. Speed normal. But we're going to slow it down because I recorded it on fast, and that was what the problem was. Let's see. That definitely didn't work. Let's try it a little faster. He sounded like, I don't know, a monster or something. That is not going to work. All right. All right, we're just going to have to. All right. So, yes, that didn't work either. All right. So what I'm going to have to do is, as I said, upload it separately for you so you can take a look at it and listen to it yourself. And I want everybody to vote. Please, please vote, because I really want to know what you think. It'll be a brief video so you can watch it really fast. So thanks for coming along. Let me do real quick. Were there questions that I haven't answered? So let's see, any questions? I'll always be sure to put your question marks at the beginning so I don't miss them. And I'm thinking these are mostly comments, not questions. But anyway, great to have you. And don't forget, queue up that video later. I'm going to have it at the right speed and you can listen to it then. See you tomorrow at 7.